How you doing, everyone? My name is Matt Brown. I'm a solutions architect here at Endor Labs. And in this final installment of this lesson for Lean AppSec, we're going to talk about maintenance and monitoring in the software development lifecycle. So by the end of this one, you'll be able to understand the real nature and how important it is of the maintenance and monitor phase within the SDLC. And particularly, we'll talk about some of the challenges and strategies of managing the open source components after you've gone ahead and deployed the application, it's running. So at this point, people are actually using the application, right? How do we manage that? How do we maintain it? So we'll talk about addressing issues that may arise during real world use. There could be some user that with a use case that you didn't even think of, that they just tried it, something failed, it didn't work as expected. We'll talk about how to iteratively refine your software, regularly updating the software as bugs occur, security issues may pop up, changes happen, but also, hey, as user needs evolve, right? The business requires something new or the client requires something new. How do we regularly update this to stay relevant? We'll talk about regular dependency updates for your open source components, making sure they're current and secure, they're well maintained, right? Talk about some monitoring when it comes to vulnerabilities. So continuously checking for potential risk, right? Potential security risk or licensing risk, or things that doesn't have to be CVEs. It could be malicious packages, some typo squatting, maybe something like that. Some community engagement. So we want to gain insights and help the open source community. We'll talk about also handling deprecated dependencies. Hey, nobody's maintaining this anymore. What do we do about it? How do we switch it out? So we're now at the point where our application's been running out there. People are using it. We want to make sure that we have the longevity and stability post deployment once it's out there, right? You're constantly iterating, but we want to make sure that our application is running well. So what is that role of maintenance and monitoring when it comes to the SDLC? So there are some challenges that may evolve. Needs are going to change, requests are going to be made, bugs are going to arise. We really have to be able to adapt to a changing environment and technologies. Things get updated all the time, things change. We need to make sure that we're quick to adapt to those changes to have a good application, to have a good, healthy application that is meeting the desires and the requirements that we laid out way earlier in the SDLC. So we want to continually make sure that the software aligns with user needs and feedback. So how can we help to do that? We want to, again, we talked about maybe having some sort of project management, something like a Jira, where you're taking down these issues, bugs, security issues, vulnerabilities, unmaintained software, user needs, things like that. We need to really prioritize those, categorize those, and based upon that, propose solutions, right? A user wanting the button a different color is going to definitely take less priority than, hey, we want this new feature that will add 20% ROI we project to our application. There's a lot of, we don't want to treat everything as important because when everything's important, nothing's important. So we really want to have a good system of prioritizing and categorizing different aspects of user feedback, issues that may arise so that we can properly address those and propose good solutions and update them. There's some challenges that definitely arise and we need to implement a really good strategy. There's for vulnerabilities, for example, I've seen some folks use like the t-shirt method. I think this is like a Microsoft thing where they use like small, medium, large, extra large. And those are like t-shirt sizes and they kind of rank priorities based off of, all right, this is a small, medium, you get the idea, right? But just having a very clear prioritization strategy depending upon the issue or the feature or the need that arises, it's going to be super duper important to get everybody on the same page in order to actually implement them and propose solutions. There's a lot more that we could talk about in that sense, but I want to talk more about what does the role of open source play in the maintenance and monitoring phase of the SDLC. So it's important to stay updated with dependencies. Now, I'm not saying, oh, just update the dependencies all the time or just change the dependencies all the time. That's not true. We want to just have the visibility of what's in our software, right? Whether we know we're bringing it in or not, we know we're bringing it in if it's a direct dependency. We may not know if it's a transitive dependency. So there's going to be a risk involved of when to update and when not to update, right? Like we mentioned before, their technology is constantly changing, new features are constantly being added. But do we need those features and those capabilities? What's the risk of if we make this change, is it going to break everything? Is it going to degrade our application? Or is this new feature capability really important to us? And will this actually solve a need for the user? Will this make our application run more smoothly, faster, better, whatever have you? It's going to add a great capability. These are the risks that we have to weigh whenever we're making a decision to update or not. Is it a security risk versus a major change that adds a brand new feature, right? There's a lot of different risks you want to take into consideration, but it's really up to you on how you want to implement something new. It's just like any other change you make, right? We make a change, we want to do our testing, we want to make sure it's right. Is it worth making that change when it's already been out and deployed? Things like that, right? When it comes to monitoring for vulnerabilities, okay, there's a couple different views on this. There are a couple different definitions, I should say, on this. On one side, it's the monitoring in the sense that I think everybody's familiar with. Hey, this application is running. I want to be with the application, viewing what's happening and seeing or monitoring for some kind of attack or something that's happening live, like in a live running application, like a dynamic kind of thing, which is definitely needed. And it's something to keep aware of, because if an application is being attacked, you want to be able to know what's happening and where it's happening and how it's running and things like that. There's that side of the monitoring. There's also monitoring when for static analysis, or it's more for SCA, for software composition analysis, because they're known CVEs, right? You build your application in the CI, and then you have that last build step or that last test, whatever you want to call it, as the security scanning step, and then immediately deploy to staging or whatever have you, right? That's your kind of, okay, this is a mirror of what's going to get deployed out into prod. So what can happen, or what you can do, is say, okay, I know that this is the application getting deployed out there. It has these components in them. And then let's say 2 days later, there's a new CVE that's been disclosed in one of the components in that application you deployed 2 days ago. You want to get a tool that, quote unquote, monitors for any newly disclosed CVEs. So it will tell you, hey, that application you deployed 2 days ago, it has this component in it. 3 hours ago or yesterday, after you deployed it, there's a new CVE in that component. This is what it is. This is where it is. Is your code calling it? Is it reachable? All these kind of things. That's that other sense of monitoring. So not in the sense of a real time, an agent's there and it's monitoring the application, looking at it run. It's more of, hey, proactively, we're letting you know about this vulnerability. It may not be exploitable, maybe brand new, but here's where it is. Here's where it's running. Here's the application with which it was deployed, and you want to use these tools in combination. They're very complementary to one another, right? But the main thing is that it's really important to have a very kind of swift and quick response to these vulnerabilities in order to address it really quickly, okay? Community engagement. So the open source community is great. I think everybody engages regularly. It's a really cool thing to see. There's a lot of very large enterprises that use a lot of open source components. And if these were paid components, every open source maintainer would be filthy rich, because a lot of times what happens is they use it, and whether it's compensation or whether it's contributing back, I think we've come a long way in recent years, but we can always do better. Everybody can always do better. So I think a lot of companies, like I said, everybody's, getting a lot better. I think we're doing a much better job in the last few years, but keeping that active engagement with these maintainers, compensating them in some way, contributing in some way. If you see an issue in an open source component you're using, let the maintainer know. Open an issue, open a pull request. Being able to actively engage and communicate with the maintainers of a lot of the software we use to make everything run, I think that's super duper important. And what's great about that is maintainers can gain feedback. Everybody stays informed about any upcoming changes or issues that may arise. And everything goes a lot more smoothly with the open source community. I think it's really beneficial to keep up that community engagement with the open source community. It's really cool to see. It's really cool to see somebody that they just do this for fun and everybody uses it, and it's really nice to see. We want to make sure we're helping those people out, right? So that kind of brings us into like deprecated dependencies. You have all these components, all these open source libraries in your application. You're bringing them in knowingly or unknowingly through direct or transitives. There is risk associated with unmaintained open source components. It happens all the time, right? Life happens. A lot of open source maintainers, they're doing this on the side in their free time, but then life happens, they get a new job, they move, start a family, and now instead on a Saturday at 10 a.m., you're working on your fun open source project, you have to take the kids to gymnastics or something like that. Things happen, right? Priorities change in life. So it's really important to stay on top of any dependencies in your software or your application that you're bringing in. It's important to understand what's going on with them and having a really good strategy for transitioning to alternatives should it get deprecated, should it get abandoned, something like that. Because at that point, it really is like a sitting duck, right? If nobody's maintaining it, there's no issues being open for it, there's no pull requests, it's not being worked on, it gets a new CVE assigned to it, and then nobody's working on it, right? It's just very important to have that clean, to get that kind of view of your dependency health, because if something should happen, you want to be able to go in, quickly see it, and swap it out. There are tools out there that will tell you, hey, you have this version of this dependency that hasn't been updated in 14 months and is 28 releases behind. At that point, you really need to take a good look to say, okay, what's our strategy to swap this dependency out, right? If there's nothing available, there's nothing available. And then maybe you create a fork of that dependency and work on it yourself and open source that and make it maintainable and things like that. Or if it is swappable and again, you associate that risk to say, how much effort, how much lift is this going to be to swap out this dependency? How much of a breaking change will it be? Will there be a breaking change? Things like that. But the important thing is to have some kind of strategy to really understand what is the open source health life cycle. How is my open source components, or how are my open source components in my applications managed? How do we manage them? How do we know about them? How do we pick them? How do we maintain them? How do we secure them? All these different things need to be thought about very carefully in a strategy where you say, if this happens with an open source component, here's what we're going to do about it. So this is really important for the maintenance and monitoring portion of the SDLC. And your application's out there and it's running and hopefully it's doing great. We've planned, we've designed, we've developed, we've tested, we've deployed, and now our application is out there doing a lot of good for the world. So we really hope you enjoyed this series of videos. If you have any questions, please always feel free to reach out to any of us at Endor Labs here. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.